I wanted to take this opportunity to go ahead and address a question that has been raised over on the forum in the community. It's been going for some time, and I'm sorry that I didn't see it, or I might have responded. There's a question about the Dick Blick pencils and whether they have a good quality or a consistency to them, in particular the 4H grade. First of all, I've never used any brand of pencils that didn't have some inconsistencies from time to time. It probably depends on the batch that you have, and if there is an inconsistency, they try to quality control. Any brand would try to quality control as best they can, but there are going to be some that, if there is an inconsistency, like a little hard grit, almost like a piece of sand in the lead, that can actually scratch your paper. If there is an inconsistency, it's hard for them because they can't test every single pencil. So there's a possibility that there could have been something slipped through. But again, I have had that happen regardless of the brand. I have quite a number of Dick Blick pencils in stock that I use. I always buy a quantity of them, and I have not run into any problems like that in the batch that I have. And some of you have thought that maybe I'm not even aware of it because I'm evidently not using them in the studio class. In the studio class, when I started it, we were using the Prismacolor, which was the latest owner of the turquoise brand. I was using up those, and I still have quite a number of them, so it'll continue on for quite some time. Those in my studio class. I originally had painted them different colors so that we could solve the problem of you wondering what pencil I was using. You could just quickly look at a color and realize, and regardless of the brand, realize what grade of pencil I was using. And so I am using those, and when I finish with that stock, I will go over to the Dick Blick. But I think it was Bruce. Is it Bruce that? Yeah, Bruce. He wrote a letter to Diane and asked a specific question. He wanted to know if it was possible that I could do a project with just the Dick Blick pencils, and that's fine. But what you don't realize is that I'm just drawing in this studio on the project on the camera with the turquoise Prismacolor turquoise pencils. And when I'm finished with that, I go into my classroom where I'm teaching my other students, and I continue the project with my Dick Blick Studio pencils. And I'm very happy with the way they are working for me. And again, when I get to the place where I'm in the studio and I'm starting to use the Dick Blicks, I will just paint them different colors to maintain our color coding. At least that seems to be the way we would do it right now. And so it wouldn't be evident that I'm actually using the Dick Blick pencils. If you have seen the pencil test that I did quite some time ago now, it's probably been close to 3 years that I did that. Naturally, I couldn't cover every pencil in existence, but I did take the ones that were available to me. I think there was 9 or 10 different brands, and broke them down. And the reason that I did that is because the Prismacolor turquoise pencils that I have now are from a previous batch manufactured in the United States. They decided to go ahead and probably save some money. They changed their manufacturing of their pencils to Mexico, and whatever happened down there, the pencil just lost, in my opinion, its long standing as a superior pencil, and it became extremely inconsistent and of very poor quality. And so we ended up being forced to find a new one to recommend. And when I do recommend a pencil, I want you to know that I don't endorse the pencil. I'm just telling you what I'm using. and which one I am probably happiest with at the time. And so I went through a number of the pencils and broke it down according to this criteria. On the pencil test, and you have a chance to go to the test, it's on the 5-pencil method website, and look at the videos, and you will find a category in there. I don't know exactly what it is, but you'll see that there is a category of the pencil test, and maybe some other links. I'm not sure. Shouldn't even have stated it like that. But yeah, we'll make the link available to you so you can easily access it. But it's really good. If you really are interested, it's really good to look at that breakdown, because I explained what the criteria was. And the criteria for me was what was going to give me the most consistent increase in value as I went from 4H to 2H to HB to 2B to 4B. It turned out that some of the brands of pencils, there might be a couple of the pencils that were almost indiscernible, almost the same. It almost seems like maybe they possibly put the wrong lead in the makeup of that pencil by mistake, because the two, supposedly different grades are so much alike. In fact, some of them are so bad that they actually have, they skip a grade of pencil, and the one 2 pencils down is almost like the first one or the second one. And I want to give you every advantage when you're working with a pencil, not only to take advantage of the grades and understand that you want to depend on the pencil, because you already have a very consistent and an awareness of the pressure that you're applying, that you can take advantage of those grades and have one more thing that is going to help you achieve the values and the gradations, and be able to have the proper range of value within any set that you're working. And so I broke it down like that, and I found that there were several pencils, brands of pencils, that worked quite well with that incremental, consistent increase in value. Some of them, though, as I was testing them, I found that I wanted to try to see if we could erase it well. Coincidentally, some of you are saying that you love the Tombow Mono. In my experience, I love the Tombow Mono as well. Well, when I got down to comparing it to the standard that had been set by Prismacolor's turquoise pencil, it was a darker set of values. Overall, each pencil in itself was darker than the previous pencil. So I couldn't mix and match, that was for sure, because if I picked up a 4H, it could very possibly be as dark as an HB. So then, as another test, I wanted to make sure that we could get it off. And as many of you that follow me know, I'm really driving home the fact that I want you to be able to make renovations, alterations, adjustments, corrections, repair damage, and all those kinds of things without having to just throw out a piece that might have been working well if it hadn't been for the fact you can't make a slight correction. We don't see everything as we start drawing, and so it's really nice to be able to, assess things as you go, and as contours developed and clean edges of value and the depth and dimension start developing, you'll find that things will look different to you. And so it might be necessary, for you to, work on the proportion a little bit. Maybe something wasn't quite the shape or the angle that you had expected it to be at first. And so I wanted to see if I could get the things off. The Mono, the Tombow Mono, is it the Tombow Mono? Yes. And I don't have them in front of me. But the Tombow Mono was one of the ones hardest to remove the graphite. It had a tendency to go into the fibers of the paper, and it was harder to clean off. And that was my criteria. So I did several stripes, if you look at the pencil test, and you could see where I tried and mentioned that I had done an eraser test. And so that was another criteria. Not only the consistent increase in value, but the way it was able to be erased. I also wanted to know, what kind of a consistency it would give me. Consistencies in lead, whether it was the same 4H as another 4H I used in a batch. And so I went through that as well and found that some of the brands, General was one of the ones that seemed to give me a considerable amount of problem. General's Kimberly, very inconsistent, almost like the Prismacolor turquoise became after they started manufacturing them in Mexico. And so you would have light and dark, and all of a sudden, an accumulation, and then it was harder and very, very inconsistent. So that's something I've always been sensitive to, is the inconsistency in the lead. When you're working with a pencil, regardless of the brand again, because you will, I almost guarantee you, find an inconsistency, you want to at least be aware of that, be aware of the sound, the feel. You can pretty much tell when you have a little bit of a grit in your pencil lead. And make sure that you aren't instinctively trying to press harder and actually use that pencil that has that grit in it to damage your paper, because it's easy to damage paper anyway, and all we need is to have a little rock in there, let's say, and start scratching our paper. But if you become aware again of that feel, like I said, and the fact that it's not going on well, and the sound, all those little keen senses will tell you, take that pencil and put it in your pencil sharpener quick and see if you can get past that little grit. Sometimes it'll come right off, sometimes just maybe scribbling or working it on a scrap piece of paper a little bit, will get you past that little piece of grit. And sometimes, once in a great while, you'll find that there's enough of it that you might want to discard the pencil because you can't seem to sharpen past it. So those are things that I think are the nature of graphite. And it's understandable, because some of you said that you're having more problems with the 4H. If you understand the makeup of a lead, it isn't just a pure product, it's a recipe, it's a mix. What happens is your HB is a 50-50 mix of clay and graphite. Graphite is a mined product. And then when you get up to your 4B, and the closer the bigger the number with the B, the more pure the graphite is, until you get all the way up to the 4B, or in some cases, which I don't recommend for the process we're using, the 8 or 9B. This is more pure graphite. I think inconsistencies seem to be more apparent with the harder pencils like the 4H, because of maybe the inconsistency in the clay. And also the clay is making it a harder pencil. So overall, whatever is causing an inconsistency becomes even harder because of the makeup of the lead. And so the larger the number, as you go on the other side, on the let's say the left side, that's the way I lay them out, and HB is in the middle, and on the left of that I would put my 2H, and on the left of that I would put my 4H. On the right of the HB I'd put my 2B, and on the right of that I would put the 4B. The larger the numbers one way makes them darker, and the larger the numbers the other way makes them harder. So the harder ones have more and more clay to achieve the harder grades, and the darker the pencil, it is progressively more and more graphite, pure graphite without the clay. So anyway, that might help you understand it a little bit. As far as a second or third recommendation, I did make a rundown of some of the other pencils, which I thought were quite good. I was also very concerned, or at least appreciated the price of each pencil. I originally picked the Blick because not only did it have a good quality, but it also had the best price that I could find. And when you got into some of the ones like Caran d'Ache and Faber-Castell, they go considerably more expensive. The Caran d'Ache Graphwood at the time was more than double the price, maybe even triple the price of the Dick Blick. And I always think that's a factor because I want all of you to be able to participate and be able to come up with a very economical set of materials. And yet that doesn't always mean that you're going to be having something that's inferior in quality. Sometimes that very economical material is going to actually be the very best. And so putting them all together, I have tried to come up with something that each material complements or gives you an advantage in using the next set of materials, the pencils, the paper, the brush, the eraser, and whatever it happens to be. Now, some of you are trying to solve the problem, by saying, well, maybe it's your paper. And I think Bruce was talking about the fact that it seemed like when he was using the Blick Studio 4H pencil, he used the term, it went on like butter. And I think what he's trying to say, normally I think some of us in our language would think that going on like butter means with ease. But I think what he was talking about is it actually almost seemed like it wasn't going on. It was just sliding over the paper. That's just my guess. If I'm wrong, I guess we can have some more dialogue about that. But my guess would be that it's in how the pencil is being applied to the paper. And that's why some of the core concepts are so important, because it not only gives you an advantage of the materials to use, but how to protect the very quality that we want and have chosen it for. The paper is very soft, but the paper is very durable. The paper is very soft, and so it also allows just an opportunity for a quality and a refinement that we may not find in some of the other harder, coarser, textured papers. The makeup even of the paper can be very, very hard. And with the Strathmore Bristol Vellum Series 300 paper, it's got a softness but a durability that just makes it ideal. And so there is a certain conditioning of the paper that we go through, but we don't want to per se, change the surface. We want to protect it. The other thing about it is the paper. I'm just going to go ahead and put this on here quick. This is the Strathmore, usually up at the top, it'll say 300 series. And then it comes down to the Strathmore Bristol, and then the vellum surface. And what you want to do, though, is make sure that when you take it out of the tablet, and this one's already loose, but you'll lift up one corner like this and pull it this way so that you don't bend or have to struggle with it. As you try to pull out a piece of paper, if you're not careful, you will end up by having a very difficult time and could actually dent the paper like so. Let's just see, maybe you can't see that. But you see I've already dented the paper just because I'm struggling with it. It isn't going to pull right off. And if you get to handling it too much, you're more apt to damage the paper as well. So I pick up this one corner and I start this way so that it tears it off of here and just lifts right off. And then I want to make sure that this is a small enough paper that it's fairly rigid, but I want to make sure that I don't try to always handle it like this. You can start seeing that I'm already having a tendency to make an indentation here. And then if the paper is big enough and it collapses, well, then I have a dimple. And so we don't want that to happen either. So I always like to handle my paper like this, or I hang it. I hang it, with my holding one corner or one edge, like so. And that way I'm not putting an unnecessary weight cantilevered out there, away from my hand where the weight of the paper could even collapse it or whatever. Now, the other thing about this is that when I take a piece of paper out, I not only want to be careful how I'm tearing it out, but I want to turn it over. And this is the interesting thing about this particular paper. Very, very subtly, there is a change in the texture. I want texture. It's extremely valuable to me. It's how I achieve, the facial textures, the pores, different things that keep it just from looking like some burnished manufactured piece of plastic. And I want to be able to have that and work it to my best advantage. So I always want to go ahead and take it out, and then I like to shine a light on from one direction. May not show it. And if you do, it's like, there's some texture showing. See over here? There's some texture showing. That's on the front side of the paper that they anticipate you're going to draw on. And that has just enough extra texture that it makes it a little more difficult to get the smoothness in some of your textures that you may try to achieve. It's not that you can't use it like that, but the other side has very little of that. And yet there's an inconsistency about the paper. You'll find that some papers, the Strathmore 400 and the 500 series in particular, have a very consistent texture to it. It's not random. If you look at this, each sheet could be possibly a little bit different. And I love that about it, because I don't want a pattern developing in my artwork. I want to be able to have something that it's not a large amount of random tooth or texture. It's very subtle, but it still adds the kind of consistency that I find lends itself to, let's say, a face, because a face has little inconsistencies and variations in it, and it just lends itself to that so well, and it adds a life to it as far as I'm concerned. The other thing is now, getting back to Bruce's question about going on like butter, I am constantly explaining the tapered stroke, which is placing your middle finger here, putting this one on this side and your thumb on the other side, and letting it rest in the saddle, right in the saddle of your hand. Now, naturally, there is some play, but it isn't just going to go willy-nilly and just be out there with no control. And so wherever you put your pencil, it could do something different almost every time. There is a wonderful consistency about the stroke, in that if I get this down, I can actually put one stroke on top of another, and it just almost becomes just a little darker and a little darker, instead of becoming this whole patch of tone. And you start seeing all these little individual strokes. This is the wonderful thing about the tapered stroke, one of the many things. The other thing is that because I'm back here and it takes some practice, I'm not down here like this. I'm not actually pointing the pencil at the paper and scoring it. This allows me to have a unbelievable control, in spite of the fact that I have a grace and flow to my stroke. I have something that it goes on and lands gradually, and it goes and takes off, so that I have a pointed end at each end. Well, this keeps me from burnishing the paper. I have the kind of control that I don't have to make unnecessary numbers of strokes to cover an area. And as I go, I have enough control that I can create a gradation away from an edge, and I can just go right back in, and I can plug a gap or an inconsistency very easily. So it's very, very efficient, but it takes practice to do this. And you'll find that this is just the way we have tried to control things in the past, but it damages our paper because it pokes this pencil tip right directly or quite directly at the paper, and we have a tendency to damage it. And so if you get back like this, you should be able to feather it on, and it is only going to go so dark. So you want to make sure that you're not trying to achieve all your values with one pencil or too much of a range. You want to become good enough at the stroke that you can be sensitive to the amount of pressure you're going to use. And the reason for that is, like I mentioned earlier on, I always want to be able to erase what I've done. And if I can't do that, if I can't pick out an amount of value, maybe even by poking my eraser at it, I'm pressing too hard. And or maybe I've gone to too dark of a pencil. In the case of the Tombow monos, it's a very soft lead, wonderful feel to it. But if I can't get it off my paper, I would rather have the opportunity to stay in control, be able to make the adjustments that I want. So the thing about this is that if you not only are making your initial, and I'm using the 4H even though I know it's lighter on camera, if I'm creating this for my base like I talk about so often, I am going to still not want to spend too much time. So the control that I have, the consistency of the stroke, the ability to come right back in and put that line where I want it to build a gradation keeps me from overworking the paper as well. Also, the amount of pressure I use is going to limit the amount of possible damage to my paper. In fact, whatever I am doing to my paper can actually become an advantage. I'll get my, yeah. Okay, so now this is from a different angle. I have to turn like this to go. But you see, I think somebody in that forum, made mention that the angle was, oh shoot, I shouldn't have mentioned that because I can't remember exactly what the person said. They said changing that angle anyway. Well, this is how you change that angle. I know when the pencil gets shorter that you're going to have to keep it in the saddle of your hand. You're going to have to probably get a little bit closer and a little bit closer. Some of you have found that pencil extenders work quite well because it still gives you that length that allows you to get back on the shaft of the pencil and create that angle. So we don't want to go like this and even this or that. I want to get out here as far as I can and still have that wonderful control so that now I have many advantages. It even sharpens my pencil so I don't have to continue wearing my pencil down. If I was using this more directly at the paper, I would be wearing down the tip much quicker. And I would also now be unable to make my pencils last like I want. I rarely sharpen my pencils. I want a sharp pencil, but I rarely sharpen my pencil. So when I'm doing this, and let's go back to that other camera here. When I'm doing this now, and I'm laying down that value and trying to have that very consistent application, I can end up by smoothing it down, even though I seem to be fairly successful laying down this initial foundation. And when I go back to my other pencils, they have a tendency to slide because the tooth of the paper, if we're looking from the side, the tooth of the paper is what scrapes off our lead. If it becomes like this and it's laying down flat, then our pencil just slides over it and it no longer has anything to scrape off the lead. And so as I mash this down, and it's one of the reasons I don't like tortillons and things like that for me, there's a time and place for everything, but I don't like things that mash down or smash down this wonderful tooth that I value so much and want to maintain all the way through the experience of drawing that I possibly can. So when it's mashed down like this and becomes smoother, where all these are bent over, then it becomes much more difficult for that next pencil to have anything to scrape it off, and it wants to just slide. We actually just almost polish the surface. So that's another thing that was mentioned in here, in Bruce's letter here. He was saying that it just slides like butter when I'm putting down to 4H, and then even though he's tried to really feather it with his lightest touch, it doesn't make any difference how soft he's landing using the tapered stroke. It becomes greasy by the time I get to the 2B. Now, I don't think that Bruce is talking about actual grease. If he is, then certainly, make sure you're working with a paper under your hand, because especially women can have lotions and things like that. But we all have body oils in our hands, and it is possible to get, oil or almost have a greasy feel to your paper. But I don't think that's what we're talking about. I think Bruce is just trying to describe that the other pencils are not adhering and catching that tooth of the paper. I think that probably, here I should have done this a little closer to begin with. There's a little inconsistency here too. As I went through with my eraser, I ended up by leaving something on the paper. And you can see how easy it is for this, when I go over it, to have some inconsistencies. It probably was the fragments of the eraser or whatever that are on there. And as I go across, I actually ended up by tripping on those little microscopic pieces and actually making a darker little place here. So it's another reason why it's good when you get finished, just give it a quick brush. And this Lang nickel brush is one of the great things that I love this brush. It's the softest brush I know of. And because it's flat, it gives us so much versatility. But it's good just to go ahead and go through there. If it doesn't come off like that, you can come in here and touch it off with your kneaded eraser and not try to go over it by making it darker and darker, because those little dots, those little inconsistencies will just get darker with everything else as well. So there's several things in there that maybe this was a good thing to kind of give a little bit of a review, help you have a little bit more understanding, and yet it's just a small insight into what I try to share with you all so that you can work through these problems and have the best advantages you come into the world of drawing and expressing yourself. It's a wonderful place to be, and I want you to all have fun, and knowledge will often take away that fear and also help you to have, that wonderful experience, at least one that there's a goal in mind. If I can achieve this, look what I could do. And I want you to all have that so that you can just have a great time. And I thank you for the dialogue over there. I'm sorry that sometimes it causes a little bit of confusion and that I wasn't able to maybe clear a few things up. But it's all based on my experience, and yours, you may be tailor-making for you. So we'll see you next time. When I have an opportunity to answer something, I'll jump back in maybe and we'll give you another little insight into my experience anyway. We'll see you. Bye.